Hey, this is Brad, Blue Nile Farms. Today I want to talk about hay and moisture content and internal temperatures of round bales and square bales, just so you have a better idea of what you're actually putting in your mow and to avoid potential fire hazards. You know, throughout the country, a lot of guys are baling in hot, humid weather, and you see guys posting how they're pulling bales because they're too hot or they're catching on fire. Even their balers are catching on fire while they are baling. So there's a lot of issues with fires and hay. So to avoid these potential risks, we're going to talk about today. We'll talk about hay moisture testers and a way you can test your hay out in the field. So hopefully you're going to make the right decision whether you're purchasing or making it before you put it into the barn. Because all it takes is one fire and you're going to ruin your entire crop, and it's going to cost you a lot of money in the end, as well as huge setbacks on buildings, equipment, and everything else that could be damaged by a fire. So stay tuned and we'll talk about it. So right now I'm in the process of trying to get hay into my barn that I'm baling in the field. And part of the problem that I'm contending with is weather, rain, humidity, trying to make sure the hay is dry and it's, you know, when it comes in, that it's going to be able to be put up and stacked and not going to have an internal combustion issue with the temperature. So to avoid this problem, the first thing I do in the field would be test the hay before I bale it. Now, there are testers out there, and I have one in the house that I haven't really used that much, where you can take hay in a bucket, and it's a cone-shaped unit, and you can stick it in, and you can test the hay that way to make sure it's dry. But a lot of times you can test the hay that is dry by doing what they call a twist test. And what a twist test is when you actually get some strands of hay, put them together, especially grass hay, because that's what I produce, and basically do a turn, and about within 3 to 4 turns it breaks apart in your hand. And this I'm doing pretty much in the afternoon after the dew is off. That tells me that the hay is ready to be processed. But if I went through the bale, the field, and I started making a couple round bales, the first thing I would do is take my hay moisture tester, which is this, which tells you not only the temperature but also the hay moisture content. I would actually go out and test those bales at 2 or 3 different places within the bale to make sure that it's accurate. I'm looking for hay when I make a round bale about 15% or less, and that's safe. And generally you're not going to have any problems when you put something at that temperature in your mow and worry about it being a fire hazard. So 15% or less is ideal. But I've also learned through experience over the years that getting 15% or less is not always possible. And I've also learned too is the type of hay that you're producing, and again, like I say, I produce grass hay. When I have real fine grasses, especially in second cut, and I bale it, when my round bales are made, they're super tight, and that's because those little fine strands of grass are really dense, and they create a real tight bale. So when I jam this temperature probe into here, a lot of time my temperature is around 20 to 21%. But I've learned that even though that's considered dry on second cut, I also learned too that I just monitor the temperature. And as long as my temperature is 100 degrees or less, I feel very comfortable. A lot of times my temperature range on the hay that I produce is between 70 and 90 degrees at most. And if it sits for a few days, then you get an idea if it's going up or going down. Rarely do I have a real hot bale, anything over 100, and if I did, I would definitely pull it to a side. The rule of thumb is basically if it bale is about 130 degrees or more, then you have reason to be concerned about it catching on fire. So be very cautious of that. I wouldn't even let it get even close to that. Anything goes over 100, I'd keep my eye on pretty quick. But the key is the density. So if I have a round bale that has thicker stems in it, the odds are, and it's not as tight, you're going to find that bale is not going to be as hot as one that's dense and tight and with small actual stems. And I noticed that they'll be higher. So if you even hit 20%, I wouldn't totally freak out about it, but it's something you need to monitor, and monitor also with the temperature. So that's the settings that in your head you should have in your back of your mind right off the rip. So let's talk moisture tester. This one is made by Tronics. Tronics is probably one of the leading manufacturers in making a moisture tester for hay. They are also probably one of the most rebranded units that you'll ever see coming from different companies. So if you find something made by Tronics, you're probably safe to say you have a quality unit. And they come in different sizes as far as lengths go, but this is probably the most standard one that there is. And it'll reach pretty much in the middle of a 4x4 bale or a square bale, and they work relatively very well. The kicker is on these units, there's only a couple things you really need to know. And realistically, there's a setting here as a test setting, which would show a 5, and a lot of times there's also a 3. You'll see 3s, but basically you see a 5 right off the rip. Now the most important thing as far as using this unit is there's the moisture button where it'll tell you the moisture level, and one will tell you the temperature level. And these are the two that you're going to check the most of. So bottom line is, if I had a bale like here, the first thing I would do is stick my bale in and push this little teardrop, which is the moisture. And as I push it, it'll give me a reading. And here it just gave me a reading of 14.3. So that tells me it's under 15% moisture, and that tells me that bale should be good. Now, if I stick it back in again, because you can only test one at a time, and this bale is not that tight inside. If I hit the temperature for the temp, it'll tell me the temperature was, well, I pulled it out, 73 degrees, I think, and that was that temperature. So let's go over here and look at this bale. So if I stick this bale in, which is a lot more dense, and I hit the temperature, this one's telling me the temperature is 74 or 23 degrees Celsius. If I push it in again and I test the moisture, it's telling me my moisture level is 17.2. We are above 15, but we're cold at 74. So I'm not really concerned about this bale getting hot, and it's been sitting in my barn for almost a week. So I know that this is probably pretty stable, and I'm not worried about it heating up. So normally, because when you do make a bale that's hot, it quickly gets its temperature start to raise up. And that's something you'll notice. So the longer that it sits out and sweats, the better you are. Now this bale specifically, I wound up baling it, and the bales got rained on as round bales outside. That's why I got green on the side. So what I do is I'll let them sit into the field for a couple days, make sure the outside's dry. Then I go into the field and flip it, making sure the side that was on the ground is up in the air so that dries. I don't want to put anything with any moisture in my mouths at all. And the reason for that is I stack my bales 4 high on top of each other, laying on their sides, and that's how I plan on doing it. So why would I want a wet section between, some dry sections? Because I always worry about that heating up. So I want to make sure everything on my bale that goes into the mow is 100% dry. And it just gives me peace of mind. Even though it might not be a big factor, it's still a factor because anything that's wet going in my mouth scares me because it has a potential to create internal combustion, whether it's on the inside or it's combined and sticking outside. So it's just peace of mind. So let's test these 3 little bales real quick just to give you an idea, even though they came relatively from the same field. So if I stick this bale in and I hit the tester, it's telling me 13.3, I know we're safe. And just so you understand, any round bale, I don't care if it's a 4x5, 4x6, 4x4, 5x5, 5x6, rule of thumb is for round bales, 15% moisture content or below is ideal. Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind. It does not matter, but round bales is 15%. If we're talking small square bales, ideally it needs to be 20% or less of moisture. And that's just something that's keeping the back of your head. So this one here, temperature-wise, if I stick it, it's 70 degrees. Cold, very cold. Well, like I said, this is 60 degrees lower than 130. So we're in really good shape here. I'm not worried about a fire. This one here is a lot denser. It was wet in the field right where I'm putting this in. And it was probably in a wet windrow because it got rained on. So I'm testing my moisture. This one tells me 27.8% right here. 27.8. Now I'm concerned about this bale. This bale will be pulled off to the side automatically because I know this is wet in the center. So let's hit it again. Let's check our temperature, moisture. And this one says it's 26.3. So this is a concern. So now we have a bale that's high moisture. So let's go check our internal temperature to be safe and how warm it is. Here's the thing. It said 79 degrees or 26 degrees Celsius. That's cold. It's not hot, and it's not feeling that's hot. So maybe it's just on this outside that it feels this way. But it's something I'm concerned about, so I'm going to test it again. I'm going to test my temperature. This time it says 84 degrees or 28 degrees Celsius. So this is a little warmer than the other one, but because it's so low, under 100, I'm not really too concerned about it. But this might be a bale that I don't want to put in my mouth, but because I know they had a wetter section, I'm probably going to feed this one out. And that's just because I'm kind of anal about that. Plus, if it was wet in here, my process is rebaling. So this to me is kind of like a bad bale. It was like an outside headland type bale, and it was in a wet zone. So as far as I'm concerned, this would be one of the first bales I'd like to feed out just to get rid of it. So let's test this last bale. This one went in easy. It's 13.2. So I know that that's going to be a nice temperature probably, and it says it's 85 degrees. So these are a little warmer than the bales over there, but they're well under 100, so I'm not really concerned about it, and my moisture level's good. So I shouldn't really be too concerned. So far, so good. I'm not concerned about anything. This is just the only bale here that is in question. We'll pull it off to the side, and we'll keep a monitor on it or feed it right out, and that would be the best thing I can do, or rebale it for that matter. And there's a lot of times, too, that I'll get a feel that the bales are a little warm, and the first thing I want to do is rebale them and make them into small squares, because once they're small squares, they can tolerate more temperature changes than they can if they are in round bale form. Because remember, there's a bigger bale, so if it gets hot, it's going to have more area, which is more likely to catch a fire. When you have a small square bale, you're more likely to get air to it where it'll dry quicker, and that's why it can accept more moisture. So that's kind of the rule of thumb that we're playing with here. So let's go look at a square bale and we'll investigate those. So here we have a small square bale, and I've seen different ways to do this. I see some guys trying to stick this all the way through the unit on the side, and you can do that. It's a lot more of a fight to get through, but you can push it to the side and hit the moisture meter. And this one's going to tell me it's 15% moisture, which is ideal because they said square bales need to be 20% or less. The temperature here is 73, cold like the other one, so we're cool. But you can also do the same thing coming through the top, you know, especially if you have dense bales like I do. Hit the thing, 14.9% moisture. Hit the temperature gauge, and it says it's 74. So what's nice about having one of these units, and they cost, I want to say close to $185, $150 to 200 bucks relatively. You can find one of these. The price may have gone up a little bit. I've owned this for years. I have two of them. I keep one on a tractor when I bale, and when I come back here to the, the barn, I like to test these things before I put them in the mouth, and they're well worth the investment. I have neighbors that they have bought, and I have bought hay from other guys too, especially in hay season that's hot, and they don't care. They'll sell it to you because they don't care. They just want to make their money. You can't sit on hot hay, and these bales right now, we're weighing 80 to 100 pounds, and they're green, and they're like 25, 30% moisture, and they're getting hot inside. They're going to rot on you. You're wasting your money. Same thing is included with the round bales. I've always been told as a kid, and I remember this, it's better to keep your hay and make it a little browner and keep sure it's dry than it is to make it too green. And a lot of people buy color. And maybe in alfalfa and legumes, that's what you do. As far as I'm concerned, I want dry hay. I have horses. I don't want it to mold because that's a big no-no to horses. And I don't care if it's a little browner. If that's somebody's problem, that's too bad. Because if you have quality hay that's good, and it doesn't care if it's brown or not, they'll still eat it. And moisture levels, our moisture level here, even though this stuff has been rained on, is at 14%. It's where it should be. So ideally, I think we're in good shape either way. So, that's really my rule of thumb, is make sure that your hay is dry and safe for storage, and that moisture is proper, because you don't want moldy hay. And I don't care if it's in a round bale form or not. And some people have the attitude, well, I just have cows. I don't give a shit what I feed them. Well, you know, cows want to eat good stuff too. Same thing with goats and horses and anything else. So feed them the best hay you can. For the money, you might as well. Now, a lot of times you can get your tractor and your baler hooked up with a moisture meter that could be connected to the baler. So as you're baling hay, especially in a round bale, it can tell you what the moisture content is of the bales that you're making. Now, I have not set up my balers to that extreme yet, and I thought about it because I have a habit when I'm baling, I'm going to bale all the way 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And the problem is when the dew starts coming down, obviously you're creating moisture, higher moisture to your hay. So a lot of times you may want to cease before that happens, and that's where those meters come into play. Ideally though, that's probably a good sense to do. I just haven't invested into that yet, and I may do that in the future. But ideally, you can do the same thing as use that meter and just go out and start poking bales as the night goes on. And when it gets a little bit moist, you stop. That's really the best thing I can tell you. That little meter itself is worth its weight in gold. I've had it for years. It's done a great job. I keep it on the tractor. And like I say, because I stack my hay in my barn 4 bales high, I want to make sure, and they're going to go in, you know, maybe 5 or 6 to 8 bales deep or more. I want to make sure that that stuff is dry. And it's the best thing I can tell you to do. You know, invest in one of those meters and keep an eye on your bales at all times. Do not get lazy on it. If you're on the headlands and that's where you're going to have a lot of greener bales because of the shade, maybe because of trees or whatever, make sure that those headland bales are pulled off the side and you test them separately than the bales that are in the middle of the field. Be cautious because realistically, barn fires can be avoided the best you can by making sure you don't have hot hay in the barn. And it's up to you as the farmer that's making that hay. You know, but if you're buying it, I'm telling you right now, check it. Do not assume that farmer that made that hay has made it correctly. You know, and do you feel embarrassed by it? I wouldn't feel embarrassed because if it's too hot, you can walk away and not buy it at all. And, you know, selling hay is a whole different ballgame, and we'll talk about that another day too. But it comes with its own frustrations because, you know, farmers want to sell good quality hay, but at the same time, you know, you're responsible for making sure that it's made the proper temperature. But my best advice is, you know, as a producer, I want to make sure my temperature's right so my customers are happy. For myself, I want to make sure my hay is bright because I don't want to burn down my own buildings. And those are really the two main factors that where those little electronic meters come into play, that you need to do the investment in them. And you know, I'm also comfortable too doing that twist test before I bale, even if I don't run a meter through it, because I have learned that to be quite accurate. So try that sometime, is that twist test. And if that, you know, you grab a little bit of hay and you start twisting it and it starts breaking on you the day that you want to bale, and it breaks very easy, you should be safe to go. And then back it up with the electronics. Experience is going to be your biggest key. But the problem is when I'm buying hay, like the hay I have in this barn right now, it's settled. It's not going to be the same as it was when I baled it. So I can't do that twist test because it's going to be a lot more softer because of the moisture content in the air. So it's not going to work the same way. So I'm telling you that up front. The twist test only works when you're ready to bale. Like you've got it in a width row and you're ready to check it, or you're before you even put it in a row and you rake that hay. If you can twist it and it breaks, you're ready to go and you should be at the right temperature level. Now the other thing is you can use that electronics and get that one that I showed you that goes into a bucket that's cone shaped, and you stick it in, you can test that way. That might be ideal too. But ideally though, if that little probe that sticks in is all you'll ever need to really do it right. And there's other ways that are on the market that you can test hay, but just this machine is a lot simpler, and I think keeping it simple is the way to go. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. You know, regardless if you're a hay buyer or you're a hay producer, invest in one of these moisture meters. They will make you a very happy person when you know that your bales are the way they should be. Just remember this: if your moisture levels are 15% or less on round bales, and even if they're 20% or less, and you're monitoring your temperature and your temperature is 100 degrees or less, you're probably in good shape. I prefer to be between 90 and 70. That's ideal for me as far as temperature goes. When I hit 100, I want to let them sit and sweat a little bit. But the bottom line is I want to make sure that my bales are safe. And I don't care if you're buying them from somebody or you're making them yourself. Get yourself a moisture meter, check them out all the time, and do due diligence to make sure that you're not burning down your building. I mean, there's too many guys out there that are burning up their barns or their bales are getting hot, and it's because they're producing too green a hay. Take your time. If it rains on your hay, make sure it's dry, use your tedder, and make sure that you're baling optimally. And that's really the best thing I can do. You know, grass hay is forgiving. Alfalfa and other legumes, maybe not so much. But the bottom line is you have to watch the weather. You need to do things optimally. And, you know, these little meters, you cannot go wrong with them. And, you know, I want peace of mind. If you're doing square bales, if you're 20% or less in moisture, you should be good to go. If you wind up baling around bales and you have the ability to rebale and they're too hot, get them in and make them into square bales. I've done that as far as second cut goes, where the bales were like 25, 26%. I wound up rebaling them. They were down to 20%, and he started to cool down. That was the best thing I could do, and I saved the whole field. So use your judgment. Buy one of these meters. I'm not an expert on this, but I've saved my building because I want to make sure my hay is dry. Quality hay needs to be dry hay, and I think that that's the best thing you can do is check what you're putting in your barn. With that said, thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.